Welcome back to the deep dive. Anyone who's dealt with international patents knows it can get complicated fast. And sometimes, honestly, it's the simple stuff, like just getting a letter sent correctly, that tricks you out.
Absolutely. It
Mm.
seems basic, but the rules are specific.
Exactly. And that's what we do here. Break down the MPP, the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, section by section. We're working through the whole thing in this series.
Making it a bit more digestible, hopefully.
Today, we're digging into Chapter 1800. That's the one covering the Patent Cooperation Treaty, the PCT.
Right, the international pathway.
And specifically, we're focusing on Section 1834, Correspondence. Basically, how you talk to the Patent Office and international bodies during the PCT process.
Yeah, think of it as the official mailing instructions and etiquette for your application's journey. Getting this right is fundamental.
So let's dive right in. What's the absolute ground rule for submitting papers in a PCT case?
Okay, the first big thing MPPEP 1834 lays out is this. Any paper you submit after the initial international application itself, that's key. It either needs to be a letter or it needs a letter with it.
A cover letter, essentially.
Exactly. That letter is crucial. It's how the receiving office identifies what the paper is and which application it belongs to.
So it's like the label on the package.
Precisely. The rule says it must clearly identify the application. You need the international application number if you have it. If not, enough detail, applicant name, invention title, filing date so they know exactly which file it relates to.
Okay, clarity is job one. What about signing this letter? Who has to sign off?
The MPP says the letter must be signed by the applicant. Now, applicant can mean a few things here.
Ah, okay. Not always just the inventor.
Right. It could be the inventor, sure, or it could be the assignee, the company or person the invention was transferred to, assuming that's all properly documented according to the rules, like in 37 CFR 1.46.
And what about patent attorneys or agents?
Yes, very often it's the registered practitioner who's handling the case. If they're appointed as the representative, maybe through a power of attorney or named in the initial papers, they can typically sign on behalf of the actual applicant. It's covered in rules like 37 CFR 1.34.
So it's usually the practitioner signing most correspondence.
In practice, yeah, very often.
And the signature itself, does it have to be, actual ink on paper?
Not always, which is good news for efficiency. A traditional handwritten signature works, of course. But the rules, particularly 37 CFR 1.4, allow for alternatives. The most common one now is probably the S signature.
The S signature, how does that work?
You just type your name between forward slashes. So like Jane Doe. It's widely accepted for things filed electronically or by fax, even by mail sometimes, as long as you follow the specific format in the rules.
Okay, so name. That's simpler.
Much simpler for digital workflows, definitely.
Right. Now let's get practical. What if someone makes a mistake, sends a document, but, forgot the cover letter, or maybe missed the signature, or put the wrong application number?
Okay, so the system has a bit of a safety net. It's not like your application is immediately thrown out.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. The MPEP says the office will notify the applicant about the problem. They'll tell you what's missing or wrong.
And give you a chance to fix it.
Exactly. They'll set a deadline. The rule says it has to be reasonable, typically somewhere between 10 days and 1 month. At least 10 days, max 1 month.
So you get a window.
You get a window.
Yeah.
And if you fix the omission, send in the missing signature or corrected letter within that time frame they give you, then the original problem is just disregarded. It's like it never happened, procedurally speaking.
Phew. Okay, so prompt response to those notices is key.
Absolutely critical. Don't ignore official communications.
All right, moving on. Let's talk language. International applications mean different languages. What language does the correspondence need to be in?
The basic rule is pretty logical. The correspondence should generally be in the same language as the international application was filed in.
Okay, makes sense. Any exceptions?
Yes, there's some flexibility. An applicant can use a different language if the specific receiving office, the national office where you initially filed, actually authorizes it. So you'd need to check that specific office's rules.
And what about the big international body, the International Bureau, or IB?
Yes, WIPO's International Bureau. There's a specific rule for them. Any letters you send to the IB must be in either English or French, period.
English or French only for the IB.
That's right. And consequently, any communication you get from the IB will also be in English or French. It standardizes things for that central body.
Good to know. Now, about identifying the application itself. What if there are multiple applicants? Do you have to list all, say, 5 inventors on every single letter?
Thankfully, no. For most things, standard forms general letters, the MPTP,
Yeah.
says it's usually enough just to refer to the first applicant named on the application.
Just the first one. That simplifies things.
It does, but there's always a but, right? The section points out one important exception. Filing a demand. That's the request for international preliminary examination later in the process.
Ah, the Chapter 2 demand.
Exactly. That document requires more specific identification of the applicants than just naming the first one. You have to be careful with the requirements for a demand.
Got it. So check the rules for demands specifically. Now we know what to send, who signs it, what language, but how does the office know where to send their letters back to you, the correspondence address?
Right. Super important. You need to get those official actions. The MPP explains that correspondence goes to the designated correspondence address on file.
And who sets that address?
It depends. If you've appointed a patent agent or attorney, the mail will likely go to them. Or the applicant might have specified a particular address just for receiving patent mail, maybe different from their business address. If there's a designated common representative for multiple applicants, it might go there.
So it follows the representation.
Pretty much. And if somehow there are multiple addresses provided in the paperwork, the office usually picks one. Often they'll prefer an address linked to a USPTO customer number if you're using one, as that helps centralize things.
Customer numbers are helpful then.
Very. And importantly, the applicant or the registered practitioner can change this correspondence address later if needed, following rules like 37 CFR 1.33a. So you can update it if you move or change representation.
Okay, address sorted. Now let's talk about actually getting the documents to the office. The transmission. What about good old-fashioned mail?
Mail still works. And there's a specific method mentioned in MPT 1834 that's really useful for proving your filing date, using Priority Mail Express from the U.S. Postal Service.
Priority Mail Express, the overnight one.
That's the one. It's governed by 37 CFR 1.10. The big deal here is that if you use it correctly, you can get the date you dropped it off at the post office as your official filing date, not the date it actually arrives at the USPTO.
That could be huge for deadlines.
It really can be. You have to follow the rules exactly, though. There are specific labeling requirements, like putting a certificate of mailing statement right on the label or envelope.
And the benefit is the deposit date counts.
Yes, and here's the kicker. The deposit date counts even if the USPTO is closed. So if your deadline is Saturday and you deposit it with USPS using Priority Mail Express correctly on Saturday, you get Saturday's filing date.
Wow, even on a weekend or holiday.
Even then. But, and this is a big, but mess up any part of the 37 CFR 1.10 procedure, miss a label requirement, whatever, and you lose that benefit. Your filing date just becomes the day the USPTO actually receives it.
Okay, so precision is absolutely key there.
Crucial.
Now, the method that seems way faster, fax or electronic filing, how does that work for PCT correspondence? Can you just fax everything?
Fax is interesting. MPP section 1834 says facsimile transmissions are generally accepted for correspondence. Generally.
I sense exceptions coming.
You sense correctly. There are major exceptions. First, you can't fax anything that legally requires an original certified copy. Makes sense.
Okay.
And the really big one, you cannot file the initial international application itself by fax. That's a definite no-go under rules like 37 CFR 1.63.
So no faxing the main application? What about later stuff? Replies to office actions?
The subsequent correspondence, yeah. Often that can be faxed to the right place, like PCT operations. They have dedicated fax numbers. But there's another catch.
Oh.
When you fax things after the initial filing, you generally don't get the benefit of a certificate of transmission under 37 CFR 1.8. That certificate is like the mail equivalent. It lets you certify you sent it on a certain date, giving you proof even if it gets lost. You usually lose that specific safety net with faxes for PCT stuff.
Okay, so fax is convenient, but maybe less proof.
Potentially, yes. And one more practical point. The fax has to be legible when it arrives. If it comes out garbled, it doesn't count as received.
Makes sense. And the date.
The receipt date is the day the entire transmission finishes. But importantly, that's only on business days. If your fax finishes transmitting at 2 a.m. Saturday morning, your official filing date won't be until Monday, assuming Monday's not a federal holiday.
Right. No weekend or holiday filing dates for faxes.
Correct.
And you mentioned electronic filing, too, through the USPTO system.
Yes, the USPTO's electronic filing system, EFS Web, or Patent Center, is obviously a major way documents are submitted now. It's used for all sorts of things, including complex items like sequence listings, which have very strict formatting rules, like needing to be in XML or specific text formats.
So that's another whole set of rules.
Exactly. And even electronically, there can be wrinkles like file size limits, or sometimes needing to submit huge files on physical media like optical discs, though that's less common now. The main point is, whichever way you send it, mail, fax, electronic, you have to know and follow the specific rules for that method.
Definitely. It sounds like you could follow 90% of the rules, but one slip up on the transmission method could cause real problems.
It absolutely could. Which leads us nicely into what happens when things go wrong despite your best efforts. Mail gets lost, systems go down.
Yeah, the frustrating stuff.
Yeah.
What does the MPP say about delays or lost mail?
Okay, this brings us to MPPP section 1834.02, which talks about irregularities, and it points to PCT Rule 82. This rule offers potential relief.
Relief how?
Well, under Rule 82, delays or even the complete loss of a document in the mail might be excused by the Patent Office.
Might be. What's the condition?
The condition is proof. You, the sender, have to be able to prove that you mailed the document using a registered mail service at least 5 days before the deadline ran out.
Registered mail, specifically, and 5 days before.
Yes, not just regular first-class mail. Needs to be a service with tracking and proof of mailing. That proof is your lifeline if the mail gets delayed or vanishes.
The MPP gives an example, right? Something about a strike.
It does. Imagine you send a required document by registered airmail well before the deadline, but it arrives late because of a postal strike disrupting service.
Yeah.
Under Rule 82, if you can provide proof of that timely registered mailing, and you promptly supply a substitute copy of the document, you might avoid penalties or missing the deadline. It acknowledges external disruptions.
That seems fair. What about bigger problems, like natural disasters?
Yes, this section also covers procedures for extensions when there are major disruptions. Think widespread natural disasters, massive power outages, communication network failures, things that make it impossible for many people to file on time.
Like the power outage example.
Exactly. The MPP uses that scenario. If a huge power outage knocks out electronic communication across a region, and that directly prevents you from filing electronically or even contacting your attorney by the deadline,
Then you might be excused.
you might be excused under these disruption provisions. Again, you need to show the outage was the direct cause of missing the deadline.
So there are mechanisms for catastrophic events.
Yes, and also for substituting copies if a document is proven to be lost after mailing. So while the system demands diligence, it does have ways to handle genuine, verifiable problems outside the applicant's control.
Okay, that's a lot to absorb about just sending letters.
Ugh.
But it really highlights how crucial these details are in the PCT process.
It really does.
So to recap this deep dive into MPP 1834, we covered the absolute need for that cover letter or for the paper to be a letter, proper signatures, remembering the S signature option, the consequences if you miss those formalities, but also the chance to correct them.
Right. And the language rules matching the application or using English-French for the ID. Identifying applicants usually just the first name, except for demands.
Then getting the correspondence address right, understanding how Priority Mail Express can lock in a filing date if you nail the procedure.
And the limits on faxing, no initial applications, no certificate benefit usually, plus legibility and business day rules. And finally, the potential relief for mail delays or major disruptions under Rule 82, but only if you have that registered mail proof.
It all boils down to careful, precise communication according to the rules.
Exactly. Understanding these procedures is genuinely key to navigating the PCT system successfully and avoiding unnecessary headaches or delays. It's about playing by the established rules of this global game.
Well said. And before we finish, a huge thank you, as always, goes to Mike Shepard, the creative director behind this entire MPE audio series.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike.
And the necessary disclaimer. This summary was put together with AI tools like ChatGPT and Notebook LM. It's for general info and education, definitely not legal advice. Always go to the official MPP source, talk to a qualified instructor, or consult a registered patent practitioner for guidance on your specific situation.
Please do. This is complex stuff.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on as we wrap up. We've just spent all this time talking about the nitty-gritty rules for letters, faxes, and mail dates. How does this intense focus on the mechanics of communication really underscore the deeper importance of clarity, reliability, and documentation in building the trust needed for international collaboration on innovation? Something to consider. Until the next deep dive.